All right, so here's our first real woodshop project that we're going to look at. And so what this is it's just a simple tray that you can throw your keys on, kind of like a catch-all tray that you just make, and you can throw random stuff in. And so what we're going to talk about is why do we first off have three things? Look at the top. We have our tray, we have this layout up top, and then we have this layout down at the bottom. And how do we create all of these in a way that's efficient in CAD? And so we're going to go through some different steps. Now, one of the things is there's always different ways to draw things. This is going to be what I hope is our simplest way to set it up. So we'll start by looking at some dimensions and then going into the actual mechanics of how we draw this. So I'm going to create a new design. And we're going to leverage one of the most powerful things in Fusion 360, which is that we can set parameters. And parameters, if you think about them, are something like variables. So let's say that we don't necessarily know how big we want this thing to be, or we want to change our mind down the road, or we have something that's flexible. So we're going to add a parameter. We're going to need to name it kind of like a computer science convention of, we're going to name it as board width. And our board width is going to be 7.5 inches and hit OK. I'm going to get a board length, and I believe that is 11 inches, and we hit OK. So I can go back and look at what I had here, and you'll see that those parameters are all defined already. So I had board width and then board length of 50. So I had the entire board length. So I'm going to go back and change mine there. So I'm going to go back to where I was. And look at my parameters. And just so I have it at the same, I'm going to say 50 inches. All right. I'm going to add one additional one that's important for us to look at, and that is our stock thickness. And I'm going to say that our stock thickness is 0.7. So we're going to start with a 1/8 for this, which is really about 3/4 of an inch thick, and then we're going to plane that down to about 0.7. So we'll see. Like it might adjust from there, but that gives us something we can look at. And we're going to hit OK. And so I have my board width, I have my board length. I'm going to go back and see what I had here. So on this one, 12.5 inches was how long that was. Let's look here. So you see if I click on something that exists, there's my 11. That's what I thought. I had 11 there. So I'm going to go back and add one more. So again, modify my parameters, and I'm going to have, we'll call this tray length. And my tray length is going to be 11 inches. And hit OK. All right, so those are my parameters. I have my width, I have my stock thickness, and I have my tray length. And I'm going to hit OK. So what we do always is we start with the sketch. So I'm going to click the new sketch button, and I'm going to draw on this bottom plane. I want to try to orient things the way that they're going to be in real life. So that's going to sit flat on a surface, and there we go. It has become orthogonal to that surface. All right, I'm going to create a rectangle. I'm going to create a center rectangle. So I go to create and rectangle, center rectangle, and I'm going to start here at the origin. And I'm going to draw it out. Now this is where I can start to use those parameters that I've created. So if I start typing in board width and then tab board, let me zoom out so you can see it. Board width, and get to the other one, tray length, and hit enter. And I'm going to finish that sketch. All right, so I have this here. Right, and I could extrude this up at this point, and start to make the bottom piece, and we'll do stuff like that down the road. But to be a little bit simpler on this one, I'm going to actually open that sketch back up. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to double click on that sketch again. All right, one of the things that I'm going to use that's really helpful is what's called the offset feature. So I'm going to click on either this symbol, or you could do modify, go down to offset. And so click here. I want to offset this whole shape, and I want it to go out. And I want it to go out by, you can see it's in that negative direction. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to say negative stock thickness and hit OK. So that's going to become the perimeter of my tray. Now, it's not going to all be one piece. I can't cut it like that. We're actually going to miter these edges. And so I'm going to create a line. So I can click on the line tool, or I can just hit L. And I'm going to go from corner to corner. So I want to snap to those squares. That's showing me that it's getting to an endpoint. So corner to corner. You can be off by a little bit when you're designing on a computer. So let's say I'm like really, really close and I miss it. That's going to be a problem. So I want to make sure again that I've snapped to that corner. Let me zoom back out. I'm going to hit the home button to reorient myself. Again, as you're learning to navigate through this, it's going to take some time, but you'll get pretty comfortable with it. And go like that. And now I'm going to finish my sketch. All right, so now I have the frame. What I need to do is I need to pull up the parts. I need to extrude them. So I'm going to start with the bottom. You can see I hover over that and I click. I'm going to hit the E key, or I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to extrude up by my stock thickness. And it's a new body, and I'm going to hit OK. Now it looks like my sketch went away. It's still there. I can turn it back on, and I'm going to want to in this case. So every time you extrude something the first time, it turns that sketch off. But now what I'll do is I'm going to go back, and I'm going to click on that profile. I'm going to extrude that up by 1.75. And I do not want to join. I want this to be a new body. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to go to this side. I'm going to extrude that up by 1.75. And I want that again to be a new body. Hit OK. I'm going to rotate around. So shift and the mouse wheel. And I'm going to extrude that up by 1.75. And I want to have a new body. All right. And I'm going to do it on this one here too. Now, I'm going to extrude this one a little differently just to show you a different option. I'm going to extrude, instead of having to type in the distance every time, I can type in to object. So what that does is I can click on something. So if I click on this face, it will take it up to that face. And I'm going to say new body. All right, well, we've pretty much built the tray, right? We have it there. The problem is we have to be able to lay this out and dimension this and think about what we have for a piece of lumber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another sketch. So I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to zoom out. Sometimes it's hard to see those planes, so I'm going to turn off that sketch, and I want to be on that same plane there. And this time I'm going to make a rectangle, so I'm going to click rectangle, and I'm going to make it the board width by the board length. Make a bigger rectangle, and I'm going to finish that sketch. All right, I'm going to hit the home icon, and I'm going to turn my bodies back on. All right, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to lay this thing out in a way that I can see what it'll look like on a piece of lumber. But before we do that, we need to make something that are called components in Fusion 360. So a component is like a part. Right now, these are all kind of tied together as this body. So what I want to do, first off, is I want to rename this. So this is the tray bottom. So I'm just going to double click on that. Tray bottom, and then I'm going to create a component from the body. And you can see it becomes its own separate piece down here, and that's going to be critical as we start to lay things out. All right, this is my long side. And I'm going to create a component from that. This is my short side. And I'm going to right click and create a component from that. You can see they're dropping in down here. It's not going to make a ton of sense why until we get to our layout. And this is my long side. And I'm going to create a component for that. You can see I've already named something long side, so it's put this parentheses 1 around it to differentiate it, so I can now turn that one on and off. And then my last one is create a component. This is, I didn't rename it. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say this is my short side. Okay. So I'm going to add some color coding to this. So I'm going to click on the A for appearance. And this is, we're building this out of wood, but to differentiate between what pieces we have, I'm going to use paint for this. So I'm going to drag green to the short sides. I'm going to drag red to the long sides. And we'll do yellow to the bottom. All right. So that's right clicking for the appearance. That's just going to be helpful for me to, again, visualize how this is going to lay out. Now, once we've made our assemblies here, we can do a couple of things. We could group these together into one thing called our tray, because that's what they are. But we can also arrange them. So if I want to do an arrangement, I can click on Modify, click Arrange, and what it's going to ask is for two things. The envelope. So the envelope is for us, what's the board? So that is the outline of the board that we're going to put this on. And then the objects, we want to click on all of these components. So I clicked on that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one. So it's going to try to lay them out for me as best it can in that in our envelope. All right. When we're looking at this, we have a couple of options. So I'm going to hit OK, and we're just going to look at it, and we're going to see if that's really the way that we would lay it out. All right. You can see it didn't get the bottom piece because it doesn't quite fit within our shape here, even though we know that it will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify our envelope by a little bit. Okay, so if we have something like this where we know this should fit because it's just going to cut off a piece of it, we can go into the arrangement. So you can see it's building in the timeline. We could get it down there, or I can open up the arrangement and double click on it. If we go to our envelope, that frame width, let me see what happens if I change that to be 0. And I'm going to open it up again and try to add that. I'm going to delete that. And then I'm going to add that back in. Okay, so if we look at our arrangement, we see that it's not fitting that bottom piece in there. I tried going to this and changing our frame width, our spacing to be 0 inches on the outside, and then our placement clearance to be, that's fine. So if I look here, right, the easiest way to make this work is I'm going to adjust the size of the envelope by a little bit to give it some spacing. So when I go back to that sketch, let's see what happens when instead of just the board width, we add, let's see, we just add a 1/16 of an inch, if it'll allow us to add that in there. And I'll finish that sketch, and then there you go. So we fudged it a little bit to add a little bit more width there, but okay, for what we're doing, that's probably going to be okay. So what we have now is we've laid out those components, and we get to see like how are we potentially going to cut this thing. So I haven't saved this for us. I'm going to make sure that I save this as Catch All Tray Tutorial. All right. Now we have our mitered cuts. We have our sides, we have our bottom, and what we can see is how we would potentially now actually fabricate this. So we have a board that we would be able to cross cut to length here, right? So we could cross cut it there. We can run this through the planer to clean it up while it's all in one piece. We can cross cut again here to create our bottom. And then we have a long enough piece to be able to rip cut and then use our miter cuts to be able to make those edges and then fit things together. So our last step is, after we've saved it, is we want to create a drawing from this. And so we're going to go from design to drawing. We're going to do a size A because that's our standard printer paper, and we're going to hit OK. And I'm just going to place it here to start with. I don't really care. I can come back and modify this. I'm going to get rid of this title block. And what I want to do is, when I double click on this, it shows me over here what I have. I don't want the arrangement in here right now. And I want this to be bigger. So I'm going to say, let's go 1 to 5 maybe. And let's do our isometric. Let's see what that looks like. All right, that looks pretty good. You can get a little bit smaller for this one. Maybe 1, 2, 3. Perfect. So that looks like my shape. Now if I want to make it shaded, I can double click and change it to be shaded so I have my color coding. And my next piece is, I need to figure out like how would I actually make this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another base view. So I can click on that add base view, and 1 to 3 looked about right. I'm going to hit OK. And now what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to turn off everything but the arrangement. And so that is my arrangement. It doesn't really give me the right thing until I turn it onto the top. And I'm going to again make this shaded so I can see it. All right, now that I'm looking at it orthogonally, so I'm looking down on it, I can actually put my dimensions on it. And so when I do this, I'm going to go dimension. I'll do linear dimension. That to that is 11 inches. That to that is 8.9. That to that is 12.4. Now, one of the problems with 8.9 is we don't measure things like that with our measuring tape. So what you can do when you get a dimension like that is you can double click on it, and you can change it from decimal, you can change it to fractional, and you can change it to whatever precision that you want. So you can make it very precise to like a 64th of an inch, which you probably don't want. We don't want to be necessarily to 1 inch. Let's just say that we're going down to like a 16th of an inch is what we can deal with. And so we're going to say maybe even an 1/8 of an inch for our class is what we can deal with. So that is 8 7/8. Same thing here, we double click. This is fractional, and we'll do it down to the nearest 1/8 of an inch, so 12 3/8. And then that gives us that piece, and then we'll add one more dimension, which is there, 7.5, and that's a number I can use. Last piece we'll do to make our plan set is we're going to add some text. So we'll add some notes to talk about the fabrication process. So this is something that you will create depending on what material, what tools we have available to us. So for this one, right, our first step is to cross cut our 1x8 by 60 to however long this is. Now I actually don't have that there, so let me pull that to another dimension. Now this is where the computer is helpful. I need to do this whole piece to start with, so I'm going to grab one more dimension. Alright, I'm going to pull it up here, and I want to give myself some wiggle room. I'm going to double click on that, and that's going to be fractional. We're going to go to the nearest inch on this one. So 24 inches is a good number. It gives us a little bit of room to move stuff around. And we would add that here. So cross cut to 24 inches. All right. Our next step is to run it through the planer. All right, so we plane it. Then we cross cut the bottom at 11 inches. And now we're ready to rip cut at 1.75. And then our last step would be our miter cuts to fit at 8 7/8. And our other one was 12 3/8. Again, depending on what tools we have, that's going to be different. So, we can use the miter saw, we use the planer, we can cross cut again on the miter saw, we can use a circular saw, we can rip cut with the table saw. It just depends on kind of what we have available to us. Our miter cuts, again, as we want them to fit nicely, we will either use a table saw sled or we'll use a handsaw. All right, our last step would be to save this. So this is our catch-all tray drawing, that's fine. And then we could finally export that as a PDF so that we can print it. All right. Now, one thing we didn't do, but we can go back and look at is if we wanted to, so let's just say like we wanted to modify this. So let's say that we want to make it a little bit bigger. Ideally, what we could do is if we change our board, let's just say the tray length. We're not going to change our board, but let's say we want to make it 18 inches. And we hit OK. What you can see is everything's stretched out, right? So everything adjusted. And so we'd have, without having to do any more work, because we use those parameters, we would actually have a new design. And if we saved it, right, we could go back to our drawing. It's now not linked with the correct reference. We click on this and it adjusts. Now we have to redo some of our dimensions. They look a little bit off, but that's something that we could adjust. So again, the power of parameters in Fusion 360 is huge. If you can get a design that you like, and if you can draw it parametrically like this, you have the ability to really make a flexible design that gives you a lot of variety. So I'm going to turn that back by just saving it, and then go back to my drawing and relinking that. All right. That's it. Hopefully that makes sense. We're going to do this design again a little bit differently using some different tools, but this is the simplest way for us to get up and going with our design.